Okay, once you know the size home that you need to be building, the next thing I recommend you do is that you go and purchase or at least tie up under contract your lot or land. Now, a lot of people like to go ahead and get a set of drawings, but I think it's much easier to design a set of drawings around a given piece of property than to walk around with this predetermined set of drawings trying to find the perfect lot for it. That's my feelings. So the next area I want you to do that we're going to discuss is the building lot. Once you know the size home you're going to be building, you need to be looking at land in an area where homes are of comparable size. And when you go to I will encourage you to go through the section on the appraisal and go through that before you go buy any land, because you're going to be looking at land a little differently after you go through the information we're going to cover regarding the appraisal. But regardless, you need to be building your home in an area where homes are of comparable size. The one thing you never want to be, especially if you're building a home to sell later, is you never want to be the biggest home in a subdivision. That is the kiss of death. And another thing you're going to find in areas, you're going to have zoning laws and requirements that will dictate the size home you build in a given area. Now, just because you have a great 1,200 square foot house plan doesn't mean you can build that just anywhere you want, because there may be zoning laws and requirements that require you to build at least 2,500 square feet or more. You may have covenants in a subdivision that mandate the size home you must build. But even if we didn't have these zoning laws and requirements or subdivision covenants, the price of the land would determine where you're going to build. You're not going to go out and spend $300,000 for a lot and put a $60,000 home on it. Now, you could, but that wouldn't be very smart. So bottom line, you need to be looking at land in an area where the homes are of comparable size. To find property, let me give you a couple of suggestions here. This is where your real estate agents and brokers can be very helpful. They can give you a list of available lots for sale in a given area. Your local newspaper will have in the classified section in most cities and areas a section where people can advertise land or lots for sale, and you can buy directly from the owner. The internet is becoming a good source on locating property. You can see quite a bit of property for sale at eBay. You can go to Craigslist and see where people are advertising real estate, preferably lots and land for sale. If you're in an area where developers have developed property to build homes on, and let me just tell you, the difference between a builder and a developer is a developer is an individual that will go in, they will buy the raw land, they'll clear it, they'll put in sewer lines, water lines, gas lines, they'll put in curbs, gutters, and streets, and they sell the lots off the builders. Now, sometimes the developer is also the builder, but you can buy land directly from a developer. And at this recording, we're in a down real estate market, and I dare say most developers in the country would be tickled to sell you one of their lots. They would just love it. But when things are really booming, a developer could get into a room full of builders and just look at a big group of builders and say, okay, I'm only going to sell to you 10 builders over here. I'm not going to sell to the rest of you builders. And then he'll look at those 10 builders and say, now here's the deal. If you want to buy in my development, you've got to buy 5 lots minimum. Well, the builder may, want in that development, and he'll have to buy 5 lots, but he doesn't want to start 5 homes. So even if you have a developer that says, no, I'm not going to sell to you talk to the builders in the development. Many times I have bought directly from the builder when the developer wouldn't sell to me. And the only way you're going to know this is to ask. If you don't ask, you won't receive. But I will say at this recording, nationwide, I bet you any developer would just love to see you walk through the door and they would sell you. Okay, if you're out riding around and you see a vacant piece of property, do all of you know how to find out who owns that property? Let me see a show of hands. Well, I can't really see your hands, but I know that a lot of you have no idea how to do this. Well, let me pass on some good information to you. And I tell you what, this is good information. I know back in the early 70s, I was in real estate commercial sales, and everybody in Atlanta had been hounded to death by real estate agents. And me and another fella, we went down to the courthouse and we got all this information and we went through the records and we found out everybody that owned land in Atlanta that had like 30 acres or more that lived outside the state of Georgia. And we would contact somebody in another state and say, hey, you own property in Atlanta. And they'd call back or write back and say, yeah, I inherited it years ago. Is it worth it? Anything? And we'd say, well, not much. And boy, we got a lot of diamonds in the rough back in those days. Well, I want you to take advantage of this, and I'm going to tell you some more stories on why this is really good. In the country, the United States is divided up by states, and most of the states in the country are divided up into counties. And within the counties, we have a division in many areas called districts. And these districts are divided up into land lots. And in each of the land lots, you're going to see divisions of property that people own. And each of those parcels of property have a little number on them we call a parcel number. And that is everything you need to know to find out who owns a piece of property. And you're going to see examples of this at 24/7. So one thing I'll recommend you do is your real estate agents, they usually have books that they carry around that show all this information. You could go to the courthouse and get a big wall map that shows all this, but that's hard to pull out when you're driving down the road. I'd rather you get one of the books that the real estate agents will use. And talk to the agents. They'll tell you where you could buy a new one, but these books are fairly expensive. Just ask the agent if they have an old one, because the agents normally replace theirs every year. Ask them if they got an old one that they would sell to you, at a deep discount. But if you have this book and you're riding around, if you don't know what state you're in, it'll tell you what state you're in. If you don't know what county you're in, it will tell you what county you're in. And if you're riding down a given road and you see your location on this map and you see a vacant piece of property, you'll be able to pinpoint and you'll see that you're in such and such county, you're in such and such district, and you're in such and such land lot. And you can now, if you know a real estate agent or broker that would allow you, a lot of these have it on their computers in their offices, but I don't even do that. I'll just go down to the county courthouse to the tax assessor's office. And you can walk in there and tell them that you want to see a certain district, a certain land lot. You want to see the tax maps for that area. And they'll either show you how to pull it up on the computer, or they'll have big books there and they'll show you where these books are, and you can pull it up or open the books and you can see the land lots and how the property is divided up. And it will show you that some of the land may be 10 acres or maybe just a quarter-acre lot. And in each of these properties, there will be a small number we call a parcel number. And they can tell you where to look at that parcel number, and it will give you the owner's name or his agent and their mailing address, because everybody that owns property must have a tax notice mailed to them. And you can now look them up in the phone book, or if you can't find them in the phone book, you can write them a letter and see if they would like to sell some of their property. Even if they have like 30, 40, 50 acres of land, you can ask them if they would sell like 1 acre that's up on the road. Now, this is great information. As I told you, in the early 70s, me and another guy, we made a lot of money going down to the courthouse and getting this information. Let me pass on this story too. I hired to build a commercial building for a doctor, a small medical building. And the doctor wanted the property to be in a specific location because this was convenient for his clientele. And one place he wanted was not a great area town, but it was on a major thoroughfare, and he would like to be in that location. Well, what I did is I drove in that area and I saw several vacant lots that looked like they had been vacant for quite a number of years. And I went to the county courthouse. I looked up this information on who owned the property. None of these people I could find in the phone book. So I sent all these people, there were 3 of them specifically that I sent letters to see if they would like to sell some of their land. I got responses back. They were all tickled about selling their land. They'd been sitting on it for years, paying taxes on it. Boy, they were just excited that somebody wanted to buy it. And let me just sum it up this way. We went in and bought a lot for $18,000, and it was already zoned commercial, and we got that lot for $18,000. That lot appraised for $250,000. That doctor was just beside himself. And we did it by doing exactly what I'm telling you here. One reason I like to do this, and any real estate agents, brokers listening to this, please forgive me. I don't mean to step on your toes, but one reason I like to do this is because when I'm trying to put things together, I try to do it where I'm spending little or no money. And so if I can avoid the real estate, the commission on buying the property, you know, it just makes it a little sweeter. And the way I'm able to do that is to contact the owner directly. But I don't mean to take anything away from the agents and brokers because, like I said, they can give you a list of lots available for sale in your area. They can negotiate the deal for you. They are well worth the money. But if I can find the owner directly, as I mentioned, it just makes it a little sweeter. Once you've decided on a piece of property that you're interested in, there's several things I want you to visually check on the property. First of all, just make sure there is power, electric power to the property, especially if you're out in a rural area. You may want to verify there is water to the property. You may see a fire hydrant on the street, which would indicate more than likely there is water to the property. It may be important that you have sewer to the property, so you want to look around and see if you see any manhole covers to find out if there is sewer. You can look at some of the homes that are out there to see if they have a gas meter on the side of the home to give you an indication that their gas, public gas is available. You want to just visually check and see if there may be any water drainage problems. If there's a little creek on the property, that's something you're going to have to check into because that little creek could turn into a raging river or a major flood during a major rainstorm. And those little creeks and stuff like that are going to give you problems we call not only floodplain, but tributary setbacks. There are federal requirements around some streams that they only allow you to build you've got to build a certain distance from that stream. And if you see a little stream on the property, this is something you're aware of that you're going to need to check out. You can look at 24/7 and see what the definition is for a wetland, because a wetland environment could prohibit you from building on that property. You want to see if there's any obvious utility right-of-ways, such as big power lines, which I would stay clear of if I were you, or underground pipelines that are obvious in looking at the property. Because on those right-of-ways, you can cross them with the driveway, you can have a garden on them, you can play on them, but you cannot build on them. And a lot of these right-of-ways, they really regulate you on even disturbing that ground if you're trying to cross it with the driveway. You can see if there's any potential grading problems. And when I say grading problems, if you look at 24/7, you're gonna see what I mean by a 5% grade, a 2% grade, a 15% grade. And what that is, just to verbally tell you, for every 100 feet horizontally, if you rise or fall 10 feet, that is a 10% grade or slope, whichever one you want to call it. Now, you're going to find in construction, if any of your grades are greater than 15%, that could create additional problems for you in building retaining walls and such as this. Now, in commercial work, a 15% grade could be a real problem because most handicap requirements require that you maintain an 8% grade or less. And so if you've got a real steep grade in commercial work, that could require a lot of grading, buying dirt, hauling off dirt, building retaining walls, but it could also create some problems for you in residential construction. You want to kind of look around in your area and see if there's any major outcroppings of rock, because that rock could create a major problem for you in getting the home that you want, as far as digging for a basement or having a septic tank or running a sewer line or a water line. And then if you're very familiar with your area, you've got a feel for what the ground normally looks like. I know in the North Georgia area, we've got what we call red clay. And that red clay is very stable for building a home on. And so if you're looking at property and you got plenty of just regular old ground, then you know you probably don't have any problems. But if that ground looks a little suspect, then you're going to make a little mental note that you may need to check out a few things on that property if you decide to buy it. The next thing I want you to do is, I know this could be a little difficult for you if you're not comfortable going up and knocking on someone's door to ask them questions, but you're getting ready to invest a lot of money, and I want you to do this. Just find a neighbor outside or go knock on a door and tell them that you're getting ready to, or you're considering purchasing a lot in the subdivision or the area. And would they mind if you just ask them a few questions? And here's the things I want you to ask them. Ask them if they're aware of any problems in the area that you just can't obviously see. Ask them if there's any problems in the neighborhood. If there's a motorcycle gang at the end of the street that, drives everybody crazy, or a specific neighbor that's just a real pain, you need to know that. Ask them if they have a homeowners association, and if they do, roughly what are the dues for the homeowner association, and is it a very strict association? Do they really maintain it and regulate it? And while you're talking to them, ask them, who's in charge, and could you get their name and phone number? Ask them if there's any traffic problems, because you may be there during the day and you're not aware at rush hour in the morning or the evening. It is just a nightmare. And they can go ahead and tell you this. You can ask them about the schools if you're concerned, if you've got, school-aged children. This, again, is where your real estate agents are very helpful. Your real estate agents know where the better schools are and those areas that are in those good school districts. Ask them if there's any noise problems. I remember I stumbled onto this years ago. I was looking at a piece of property in Northwest Atlanta, and I was just about ready to purchase it. And for some reason, I decided to go back and look at the property one more time. And while I was standing there kind of admiring the property, this military jet flew right over treetop level. You could not believe how loud this jet was. And what I found out, I really didn't realize it on the map, is I was in the flight path for a major Air Force base in Northwest Atlanta, and those military jets flew right over that property. And had I known to just ask a neighbor, are there any noise problems? They could have said, oh, yeah, when these jets are going in and out, it is pretty loud. And I would have known. There are parts of in Atlanta where if the wind shifts, now fortunately, they've cleaned up some of these areas, but there would be sewage treatment plants where if the wind shifted, I mean, it was almost unbearable in certain parts of town when the wind shifted. But if you were looking at that property on a day when the prevailing wind was not bringing this stench across that land, you would never know it unless you had asked a neighbor, are there any, odor problems in the area? If you're aware that everybody in your area has septic tanks, ask the neighbor if they've experienced any problems with their septic tanks. And they can tell you, yeah, this ground around here has been a problem for everybody. If they've got a basement, you can ask them questions like, do you know if they encountered any rock problems when they were digging for your basement? And they can let you know information you have like this. Completed a visual inspection, after you have talked with the neighbors. If you're still interested in the property, you now need to go to your local government agencies and ask some questions and get some information. Now, if you're within the city limits of a city, you will deal with the city government. If you're outside the city limits of a city, you will deal with the county government. And first of all, now with the internet, go online and you can pull up a lot of information that they're going to require that you have in order to build a home. And you can also see a bunch of things that you now want to ask them if you go there. But I would rather you do that, because if you show up, a lot of these people, they're irritating. They say, well, you can see this on the internet. So go ahead and see all this stuff on the internet first, and then go to these local government agencies. Now, the one thing you're going to ask in every one of these offices is you're going to tell them what your intent is. You want to build a home in this area and or on this specific piece of land. And you ask them, are you aware of anything that would prevent me from getting a building permit? You want to ask this of everyone. So let's kind of start off on who you're going to be talking to. First of all, go to the tax assessor's office. There, I want you to get a copy of the tax plat. And they'll give you a copy of it, or they'll make you a copy of it. And while you're there, you can just find out and ask in general, what are taxes normally run, on that given property and the property around it that have houses on it, if you want to know that information. Then go what is normally called the planning department. And in the planning department, see if you can find out any future plans for your area where you're looking at land. You may find out there's a major interstate that's going to go through that property that would prohibit you from building on it. You may find that they're going to build a fertilizer factory right down the street. Well, that might prohibit you from buying that property. So find out if they have future plans for your area. Then go to the zoning department. And in the zoning department, you're going to get some great information. You'll find out what the property is currently zoned. And based on that zoning, you're going to find out the minimum size home you must build on that land. You're going to find out how far you must build from the street, or I should say the street right-of-way. You're going to find out how far you must build from your neighbor's property. And these are called the building setback line and the side and rear setback lines. And this is good information. And one thing I want you to be aware of when you find out the building line is that the building line is the distance from the right of way to where you can build your home. A lot of people think it's the distance from the street is where the building line is. No, it's from the right of way. For example, and you'll see an example of this at 24/7, the right of way may be 50 feet wide. The actual street is only 24 feet wide. So if you build from the curb of the street, then you're building too close. You have crossed the building line, and that is a problem. The building line is the distance from the right of way to where you can build your home, not the curb of the street. And just while I'm talking about this, a lot of people think, well, if I get in the center of the street and measure back 25 feet, that's going to put me on the right of way. So if you got a 50-foot right of way, if you get in the center of the street, measure 25 feet back, that puts you on the edge of the right of way. Normally that is true, but the thing I don't want you to assume is that the street is supposed to be in the center of the right of way, but sometimes when they develop the street, it doesn't always come out right in the center, and that can throw you off, and that could be a problem. So I'm going to tell you later how to find out exactly where that right of way is so you don't fall into that little trap. Also, at the zoning department, you want to find out things such as what they will allow to cross this setback. For example, in some areas, the home can go right to the setback, like on a side yard, and they don't care if the roof overhangs into the setback. But I know in some areas, they don't want anything, any roof overhang or anything going into that setback. So you not only have to have the home back a certain distance, you've got to have any porches, overhangs, and things like this all the way back to that setback. And if you don't check this, and even if the city or county doesn't catch it, don't worry about it, your neighbors will. They'll be out there with a tape measure, and they'll be measuring everything, and they'll get a stop order on your construction because you got a roof that overhangs on the setback. That is a problem. Also, when you find out the setback requirements, when you take a given piece of property and you draw the building line and the setback lines, then all you have remaining is where you can build a home. So let's say that you draw all these lines on a half-acre lot, and after you draw all these lines, all you have left is about 50 feet wide in order to build a home. And let's assume you're walking around with a set of drawings that are 60 feet wide. Well, that 60-foot wide home is not going to fit in that 50-foot wide footprint. Now, you could apply for a variance to cross those lines, but that is very time-consuming. It can be very expensive, and you could have a lot of people that will fight you tooth and nail before they will give you that. Just to give you a couple of little examples here, I remember one time in Atlanta, there was a builder building luxury homes, and he had 3 of them that crossed the building line. They were too close to the street. And I suspect he knew this, so what he did is he finished and completed those homes with the thought that they would not make him tear down a luxury home that is completed. Well, he failed to realize how powerful the neighborhood committees were in that area, and he applied for a variance, and he was hoping he would get forgiveness, but he did not. They came back and they told him to tear all 3 luxury homes down. Well, the builder, in frustration, threw up his hands, gave the homes back to the bank, and went to Florida. Now, the bank came up with an ingenious idea. They tore down one of the homes, and they spent, I forget how many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and moved the entire street so that the remaining 2 homes were the correct distance from the street. And that was a lot cheaper than tearing all 3 of them down. But I know myself, I hate to admit it, but I know it's going to be hard for you to believe, but even I make a mistake every now and then. I had a project of luxury townhomes in East Atlanta, and I had one townhome that the corner of it crossed the building line just a matter of it wasn't an area larger than a piece of apple pie. But this stuff shows up on a survey, and the surveyor is not going to lie about it. And he had to show that this little corner crossed the building line just a matter of inches. Now, back in the old days, we could go down to the courthouse or the building department and show them the infraction, and they'd say, oh, no problem, and they just sign off on it. But as Atlanta became more and more sophisticated with their rules and requirements, which could be the case in your area, I had to apply for a variance. It cost me quite a bit of money, quite a bit of time. And when we showed up at that variance meeting, there were 2 big homeowner associations there yelling and screaming, make him tear the home down. And that was a scary situation. Now, fortunately, the commissioners had enough common sense that they let it slide. But the reason these homeowner associations attack these things is they feel like if you give this inch to this builder, then you're going to have to give an inch to every builder. And they will fight it tooth and nail. But I tell you what, that was a scary proposition. And I'm glad I got through that. So you don't want to fall in that trap. I want you to now go to the clerk of the court's office. And at the clerk of the court is where they'll record real estate documents. And if your subdivision has a recorded set of covenants for the subdivision, then I want you to get a copy of those covenants and read them, because the subdivision covenants will normally override the city or county zoning. For example, the city or county zoning may say you must build 30 feet from the street right-of-way. The subdivision covenant may say you must build 40 feet from the street right-of-way, and the subdivision covenant will override the city or county zoning in almost every case. Now I want you to go to what we call the Public Works Department. And in the Public Works Department, I want you to verify that there is sewer to your property. And I want you to verify that there is water to your property. Just because you see a manhole cover in the street, don't assume you have sewer to your property. Because that sewer may be crossing your neighbor's property, and to get it to your property could be a little bit of a problem. Now, what you would normally do is go to your neighbor and say, can I tie into the sewer line that's on your land? And the neighbor may very well say, yeah, no problem, you can tie into it, but I want you to pay me $5,000. Now, I will tell you, you can fight this neighbor in court, and the city or county will work on your behalf that he will be forced to allow you to tie into the sewer line on his property. But you may spend so much in legal fees, it would be a lot cheaper for you to just give your neighbor $5,000 to eliminate the brain damage and the amount of time you would spend fighting them. So find out if the sewer line is to your property. And while you're at the sewer department, go ahead and find out, based on their drawings, how deep the sewer line is at your property. For example, if the sewer line is up in the road and you want a full basement on your home and you want plumbing on that basement, well, remember, most of this stuff flows downhill, not uphill. And if your basement level is lower than the sewer line at the road, then it's not going to work unless you purchase a pump, which I'm not wild about, and you can pump the sewage uphill so it will now flow into the sewer line. You can do that. I've done it many times, but if I can prevent that, I would prefer it. Just because you see a fire hydrant down the street, don't assume you have water to your property. That water may stop at that fire hydrant, and it could cost you quite a bit of money to get it from that fire hydrant to your property. You need to find this out. I want you to now go to the health department, and if you're going to have a water well or a septic tank, I want you to make sure you're clear on the requirements for a septic tank. And I want you to find out if there's any problems with water wells in your area, and find out if you're going to need to get a permit in order to install a water well on your property. Last but not least, I want you to go to the building department. And remember, you're asking all these people, is there any reason you can see that I can't build on this property? But go to the building department, and there you can get information on what they're going to require. You can find out if there's any problems. For example, I had a student one time that was going to build on a piece of property. He closed on a construction loan, went to go get his permit, and found out that his property was in the right-of-way of a future interstate, and they were not issuing permits on that property. We've had times in Metro Atlanta where they had moratoriums on the sewer lines because the sewer plants were overloaded, and they were not issuing any permits on properties in given areas. So ask at the building department, is there any reason you see not only that I can't build a home, do you see any reason I can't get a building permit on this property? And you need to know that information. You may want to find out while you're there any names and phone numbers of any what I call permit facilitators. Going through this process of getting a permit for a lot of builders is the biggest hassle in the world. They cannot stand to deal with the city and county governments. There is a cottage industry out there where there are people, you will pay them a fee, and they will go through all this process for you to get your permit. And I know a number of people that would rather pay that fee than to go through this heartburn themselves. I personally think it's a good learning experience for you, but if you don't want to go that route, find the name and number of some of these permit facilitators. They know them down at the building department, and they can give you their names and numbers. And these people know everybody. They do this all day long, and they charge you a fee to do it. And that may be a route you might want to go. While you're at the building department, you also want to find out if there are any tree requirements in your area. As you get into major metropolitan areas, they've developed a lot of requirements around the environment, primarily trees. You want to be real familiar with what you can and cannot do around trees, and you can find this at the building department. Then I want you to contact the utility departments and verify there is electricity to your property, verify there is gas to the property, and verify there is water to the property. And you want to find out if your property is sitting way back off the road, if there's any additional charge for building, let's say 100 feet back from the road. They may tell you, well, we'll go, 20 or 30 feet, but if you go beyond that, we do charge you. And sometimes that charge is quite extensive. So you want to find that out from the water department, the gas company, and the power department. After you check out all this stuff, if you still feel good about the property, you now want to put the property under contract. Now, this is where if you're working with a real estate agent or broker, they can assist you in drawing up your contract to purchase property. this would be something, if I were you, I would call around and find a good real estate attorney. Now, you don't go to a heart doctor to work on your foot. Well, you don't go to just any attorney, as far as I'm concerned, to work on real estate. There are attorneys out there, that's all they specialize in is real estate, and they can draw up your contract. But the thing that I want to get across to you on your contract to purchase property is, tell the attorney, if you're dealing with attorneys, tell them to write it in a way that the normal human can read it and understand it. I don't want to give a contract to someone where they feel like they got to hire their attorney just to understand it. And the attorney will know what you're talking about. And I don't care, what you want. If it's important to you, don't get hung up on the fill in the blank contracts. If it's important to you, you put it in writing, and as long as two people agree on it, you've got a deal. I have specified in writing on a given lot that if a particular oak tree died, I didn't want to buy the property. That's why I was buying it, for that tree. So if it's important to you, you put it in writing. And as long as two people agree on it, you have a deal. But the main things I want you to stress in this contract in writing are some contingencies. And that is, if for some reason you cannot get a building permit to build the home you want, if for some reason you cannot get the financing to build the home that you want, if for some reason after you do the due diligence, there is unknown excessive cost to build a home on that land, then you don't want to buy the property. And not only do you not want to buy it, if you put up any earnest money, you want to receive your earnest money back. Because that's the bottom line. If I can't get the money, if I can't get a building permit, if it's going to cost me a lot of money for some reason to build on this property, I don't want to buy it. And I want my earnest money back. Those are the main things you want in your contract to buy this property. Now, just a couple other things I want you to do on there in the contract is you get permission to have a surveyor come out and survey the property, and you get permission to come out and do any tests that you may need to do on the property. But you need to get this in writing. Just don't assume the owner is going to give you this permission just because you have it under contract. Now, once you tie it up, and give yourself plenty of time to get all this done and get everything processed for your loan before you need to close. So, you may want at least a 90-day time period to get all this done, minimum, 90-day minimum. But you can make that decision yourself, and you'll know what you need to do. After you tie it up under contract, now I want you to do your due diligence. And here's the things that I want you to do. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to get a current survey, current being within the last 6 months, on the property. Now, if the landowner already has a survey, if it's an old survey, contact that surveyor that did the old one, and maybe they will update it for a nominal fee. But, surveys on a given lot are so cheap anyway that most surveyors, they're not going to update it for a small fee. They're going to want their regular price even to update it. But I want you to have a current survey. And that current survey is going to keep you out of a world of hurt. Because I've seen individuals, they will sell a piece of property and they tell you that it is 1.2 acres. It's been in their family forever. Everybody knows it's 1.2 acres. And then when you get a survey, you find out that it's 3/4 of an acre. They also tell you that on the road, there's 150 feet of road frontage on the property. and it's been in their family forever. They know it's 150 feet. And when you get a current survey, you find out there's only 75 feet of road frontage. But that survey is just going to just clear up so much. That survey is going to show any utility right-of-ways, some of which you may not even be able to see because they could be underground piping that's been there for years and you're not aware of it until they do the survey. That survey is going to show you any part of the property that's in a designated floodplain. And let me tell you, on this property in a floodplain, I remember one time I put a contract on a piece of property and there was just a little bitty creek on the property. And when we did a current survey, 2/3 of the land was in a designated floodplain. And it just didn't work. There wasn't enough room left to do what we wanted to do. And the owner was just shocked because they said they'd lived there for 30 years and they'd never seen that little creek flood. But it didn't matter. And in a floodplain, don't make the false assumption, well, I'll just fill in the ground and bring the level of the ground up above the floodplain, and then it will work. Well, yes, you may be able to do that, but it's the way they regulate floodplain. It's kind of like if you put a rock in a glass of water, when you put that rock in a glass of water, you raise the water level. Well, if you go into a floodplain and you haul in dirt and you raise the level of the ground up in that area, you are in essence raising the level of water, and they're not going to allow you to do that unless you go to another area of the floodplain and take the same quantity of dirt out. So you can move the floodplain around, but they're not going to allow you just to go in and fill it in to solve the problem without you taking it out somewhere else. Also, when you have these little creeks and stuff, there's going to be what are called tributary setbacks. These are federal requirements where they mandate you must build a certain distance from a creek or a stream. And your surveyor will be able to show this on the survey. The surveyor will pick up any buffer zone requirements that may be enacted by the city or county. The surveyor will be able to draw your building line and your setback lines on the survey, so that when you take a piece of property and you see where all these things are, the right-of-ways, the buffer zones, the setbacks, then all you have left is where you can build a home. And that may or may not work for you, but you won't know until you get a current survey. One thing I want you to ask the surveyor to do when they go out there is, if you are tying into public sewage, tell them to measure the sewer line at the property. And what they'll do is they will take the manhole cover off and they will measure how deep that sewer line is, let's say in the road. Because down at the city or county in the Public Works Department, their drawings may show that sewer line is 10 feet down in the ground. Well, that's what the drawings show. Well, the contractor that installed the sewer line may not have installed them according to the drawings. And so when the surveyor checks it, he may find out that it's only 6 feet down in the ground. And that may present a problem. One thing I want you to ask the surveyor to also do is to include in his price what we call a 2-foot topo or 2-foot topography map. And what this is going to show is the lay of the land. It's going to show you if you have any steep grades or hills and gullies and stuff like this that could present a problem for you. Now, on the 2-foot topo, you'll see examples of this at 24/7. If you're building on like 50 acres of land, a 2-foot topo of 50 acres would be quite a bit of money. So just tell them you want to, just do like a 2-foot topo where the house is only. Just say where a half acre is or an acre, where the house is going to go. You don't want to do the entire 50 acres, or I wouldn't want to spend the money on it. You just want it where the house is going. Also on the survey, the surveyor will check on any tree requirements, and you want to go ahead and get a tree survey. And what this is going to do is this is going to show specimen trees, their location on the property. Because then when you decide where you want to put the home, that's going to indicate which of these trees may need to come down, and that could impact the situation. I did that small medical building I was telling you about earlier. On that property, there was a large oak tree, and I wanted to take the oak tree down, and I moved that building 25 feet just to save that one tree. I didn't like it. I still don't like it. But had I taken that one tree down, it was going to cost me about $11,000 in tree replacement. So it was easier to move the building than to take that tree down. So you want that tree survey that corresponds to what the city or county requires, so you'll know if you're going to, what the impact of taking any of those trees will be. If you're going to have a septic tank, you want to see the requirements for the septic tank. A lot of times they'll require you to do a soil test. After you do a soil test, they'll require you to do what is called a percolation test or a perk test. We used to just hire the surveyor to do the perk test. A lot of the surveyors will do it. When you're at the county health department, they can give you a list of people that they recommend or that's on their approved list for doing the soil testing and or the perk or percolation test. And this shows that the ground will allow you to have a septic tank. I will mention here that if you fail the perk test, a lot of people feel that if they can't pass the perk test, they can't build a home because they can't have a septic tank. That is not necessarily true. There are septic tanks that have been developed for rocky areas, and you want to check with your health department to see if they're aware of some of these other septic tank systems that enable you to have a septic tank on ground that was not, that could not pass the perk test. Some health departments will approve these type of tanks, others will not. You can find out from the health department. One thing I want to mention on the soil test is if you suspect that the soil in a given area is not very stable, and there are parts of the country where soil is a real problem, Texas, Colorado, and things like this. If you do have unstable ground, the soil engineer, and you can find all these people in the yellow pages, engineers, soil, or engineers, structural, or engineers, civil. But the soil engineer may be able to tell you what you can do to the current soil in order for it to be stable enough to support the foundation of a home. Or they can at least give you the specifications on the soil so that you can now talk to a structural engineer. You can show the structural engineer what you're dealing with, and that structural engineer can design your foundation so that you can build a home on this unstable ground. I want you to bear in mind there's parts of the country, on the coast in Florida where the ground there's no stable ground. But there are ways of building on that stable ground where it's very stable, but you will have soil engineers and or structural engineers designing your foundation so that you don't have any problems on this unstable ground. If you are suspecting any wetlands on your property, and look at 24/7 to see the definition of a wetland, you may want to do a little homework just so you're not caught during construction with someone coming up stopping the construction because you're disturbing a designated wetland in commercial work that you do not normally see in residential construction unless you're building a very large home is what we call a hydrology study. And what the hydrology study will show is when you put a large home on a piece of property and you're putting in driveways and turnarounds and stuff like this, what it shows is how you are impacting the flow of water on that property and showing how much water is going to be dumped onto your neighbor's property or into the street. And on the hydrology study, you normally deal with civil engineers, check around, so you're not paying, an arm and a leg if you're required to do a hydrology study. And then what they're going to do is show you what can be done to solve any runoff problems that you may have. It could be to build some kind of retention pond or an underground retention pond, or just ways of slowing up the water or retaining the water so it doesn't create a problem, especially for your neighbors. But I will say that some of these solutions to water runoff problems can be very expensive. Now again, a hydrology study, very common in commercial work. You normally don't see it in residential unless you're building a very large home. Talking about the hydrology study reminded me another stress point on why to get a survey. Because a survey is going to show you on the property an area on the property where there may be a retention pond and you're not even aware of it when you're looking at the land. And that retention pond, you cannot destroy it without spending a lot of money. So that's another good reason to have a current survey. In some parts of the country, you're going to have to verify that there is no hazardous waste or buried trash on the property. And they can tell you how to acquire this verification. So just be aware of that. If you have concern about rock because you want to dig a basement, the cheapest and easiest way to handle a rock test is you'll get a tractor out there called a backhoe. You can see a picture of this at 24/7. And what you'll do is you will kind of stake out where you plan to build your home, and you'll stake out the area where you plan to have a basement, and you'll have an idea of how deep that basement should be in the ground, and you will get a backhoe out there and you will dig 3 or 4 test holes down to the depth that you need to go just to see if you hit any rock. And that's the cheapest way to do a test to see if you're going to hit any rock. If you're concerned about running a sewer line, what you can do is just tentatively stake out where that sewer line will probably be running, and that tractor can take several test digs down to a depth that you may need to go, and just to verify that along that path you're not going to run into any rock problems. But that tractor, based on what they charge per hour, and even if they have a 4-hour minimum, you should be able to easily do any and all tests to see if rock is going to be a problem. A couple of miscellaneous items I want to cover regarding the lot. First of all, a bad lot could be a good deal. And here's what I mean by this. Let's say you go into a subdivision, for example, and you see an old rough-looking piece of ground that the builders have passed over it. In our area, we'd call it a dog lot. And let's say that the lots in that area normally run $30,000. And you get some estimates that if you spend about $10,000 on that lot, you could turn it into a show place. And $10,000 would be quite a bit of money to spend for bringing in some fill dirt or building some small retaining walls or something like this. Now, For your time and effort, you're going to pay yourself $5,000. Always pay yourself for your time and effort. So that's a total of $15,000 you feel like you would need to spend in order to turn that old dog of a lot into a show place. Well, as long as you could, if you subtract $15,000 from the average cost of $30,000 in the neighborhood, as long as you can buy that lot for $15,000 or less, you have a workable deal. There have been fortunes made in real estate on this premise. Someone would go out and they would buy something for a song what no one else wanted. They spend a little money on it and turn it into what everybody would pay their hard-earned money for. I and my students, we could tell you so many stories where we have applied this. We would go out and just pick up this rough piece of property. It's such a ridiculous low price, spend money on it, and just turn it into the best lot in the subdivision. The next thing I want to mention is that if you are purchasing any waterfront property, I stress that you go to 24/7 and see all the things I list there that you need to be aware of when you're purchasing waterfront property. I love waterfront property. Matter of fact, I've been somewhat surprised up in the North Georgia mountains. I always thought a lot with a great view would be the most desirable. But much to my surprise, property that was on water, a stream or a lake, actually brought more than those lots with a great view. So I love waterfront property, but there are quite a number of things you need to be concerned about and check out, and you're going to see a list of those things at 24/7.